Well, what's up, Paradigm? I hope this video finds you doing well, warm inside the comforts of your own home. I want to invite you to grab a copy of God's Word, find the Gospel of John, is where we're going to be at tonight. And as you are getting there, I don't know if you had the experience that I had on Sunday night, went to a Super Bowl party, and I found myself having a new experience here in the Midwest. So again, I'm from the South, and so a lot of the conditions and how you drive through all this stuff is a little bit new to me. And so we get in the car, and I've got my family and my crew with me, and the windshield begins to ice over. And so my wife's getting nervous. My kids are asking questions like, Dad, are we going to be safe? And I'm doing one of these numbers like, I've got the defroster running. It's melting about that much visibility through my windshield. And I'm just kind of hunched down looking at this thing, trying to drive. I pull over into a gas station to go get some windshield wiper fluid because we'd already gotten rid of all of that. And I go in there, they don't have any. So I'm looking around thinking, what can I get? What can I get? And I remembered, I can use either rubbing alcohol or get a bottle of Everclear. And so I thought, you know what? I probably shouldn't get Everclear because I may run into somebody that I know and it wouldn't really look good. Hey, I'm on the way to a Super Bowl party. What are you doing with the Everclear? That doesn't really match up with the decision that you have to, be a pastor, that sort of thing. So I went with the rubbing alcohol and I poured it into the windshield wiper fluid. We got to our destination and it was crazy, even more so coming back home, doing the same thing. I didn't know if I was going to make it. And I saw all these cars slipping and sliding, but we made it home safely. But I start there tonight because a lot of you are trying to navigate this thing called life, and you know where you want to go. And if you're going to get there where you want to end up, you're going to need to understand what love is. Love is this thing that we've kind of misunderstood in our culture, right? And a lot of us, we're looking through this metaphorical windshield, and our visibility on what love is a little bit dim, and we're slipping and sliding in life. So we maybe watch this video, and we're in the season of life that you're in, and you're asking questions like, what is love? And do you fall in love? And how do we know that we're in love? And can I find love? Or is it something that we choose, or it chooses us? And maybe some of you are watching this thinking, will I ever even know love personally? And here's what I know to be true about you. When it comes to your life, and I know this is true for you because this is true for me, like when I imagine my life and the places I'm headed in life, I always imagine someone with me. Like I have this significant other with me. For me, it's my wife, and I know that you're watching this and you're thinking, you know what, I want to end up in some strong relationships, potentially even marriage, and I want to have a relationship with somebody. If you want that relationship to be life-giving and to be a joy, you're going to need to know about love. And so we're doing this series called Decision Decade because most of you are making huge life decisions in the decade that you find yourself in. And here's what research tells us, that the majority of you are going to be married by the time you reach age 30, all right? And then it's going to be half of you by the age 30, and then the majority of you are going to be married by the time you reach age 40. And so we need to talk about this thing called love because it's so important in our relationships. And there was this columnist for the New York Times named David Brooks, and he was kind of looking at the way that we've prepared ourselves for life and then the way we've prepared ourselves for love, and namely in marriage. And he was kind of loathing in this column, like, I don't think we did a good job. Like he's like, the education system, the thing that we've given so much time, energy, and effort to, it really hasn't prepared us for some of the most important things in life. And for him, it was namely marriage. But you know this to be true. Like, you've been adulting for a few years now, and maybe you've been to the DMV, or maybe you've sat down with like a financial advisor, or maybe you've tried to navigate some adulthood things, and you're just like, you know what? I never had a class in college that really prepared me for this thing. And especially when it comes to relationships and marriage, like you think about as early as you can remember your parents trying to get you prepared for life. Like maybe you're in middle school or in high school at the latest, and they're like, hey, you better make a good grade on your ACT so you can get into that college. And then once you got into college, you're like, what degree you're going to pick? And so you start taking all these classes so that you can get prepared for your career. And then towards the end of college, it's like, what jobs are you going to apply for? And all of this time, energy, and effort has been spent in readying you for your vocation. But then when you look at something as significant as marriage, you're thinking, well, where do I get my information? Do I go to the View? Do I go to some reality show? Where do I get my information in regards to love and in marriage? And here's what I know to be true. Marriage is the second most important decision in your entire life. Like we want you to come to know Christ, but then it's like the second most decision or the second most important decision in your life is the person that you choose to spend the rest of your life with. And so right now, the decisions that you're making in regards to your life are critical. You know, you've heard that old saying that you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. But in your 20s and in your 30s, you are poised to pick your family. And so we need wisdom and we need to understand what love is. And so we're in this series called The Decision Decade. And here's what we've been saying is that you're going to make 85% of life's greatest decisions by the time you're 35. And so you better start evaluating where you're headed in life, who you are, what you're called to do, so that you can make wise decisions. So we've been asking a series of questions so that you can make better decisions and have fewer regrets in this decade of life. In week one, we just basically asked the question, hey, where are you headed? Where are you going? And we said it's not your plans, it's not your promises, but it is the path that you are on that's going to take you to the place you end up. And so you need to evaluate what direction are you headed in. And then last week, we just asked, hey, why are you here? And we said that the purpose of your life is to know Jesus and to make him known, and that can permeate any season, vocation, any location that you find yourself in. And tonight, I want to ask you another question, a very important question. And the title of tonight's message is, what is love? What is love? You know, Valentine's Day is coming up on Sunday, so if you're in a relationship, you better hook it up for your Valentine, all right? And in lieu of this season and this time of the year when we're seeing chocolate-covered hearts and we're seeing roses and we're seeing love cards and romantic things all over the place, I thought that it would be good for us to talk about love a little bit. And here's what I wanted to do tonight is I want to kind of talk about what love isn't, and then we'll talk about what love is, because you're going to need love in any relationship. And you're going to need love in any romantic relationship. And the Bible has a lot to say about love. Now, when it comes to following Jesus, Jesus really isn't the romantic type. Like, we don't know if Jesus ever went on dates. We don't know if he had a prom date or a girlfriend or whatever. But we surely know that Jesus was never married. And so he begins to speak in regards to the way that we love in a way that really supersedes marriage, and it is universal. It applies to any relationship. And so right now, I want you to think about like your romantic life, but also just think about your relational life. And Jesus, he gives us this new standard for love, and I want to talk about that for a few minutes. So in John 13, Jesus he's eating like his last meal. And so the next day, he's literally going to be crucified, and he's going to like embrace and he's going to absorb the wrath of God for mankind. And so like all of this pressure and all this time, and what he decides to do on the night before he's going to be executed is to eat with his best friends. I love this because Jesus loved being with his guys. And so he's eating this meal, and we figure out that even in this meal, there's a guy that claims to be one of his great friends that's actually about to betray Jesus. And so get this idea. Jesus is lovingly sharing a meal with his guys, even the guy that's about to betray him. And then he begins to drop some new content towards his guys. And here's what he says in John 13, starting in verse 34. A new commandment I give to you. So right now, automatically, his guys would have perked up. Like, all right, this is something new. You know, like Peter would have, he probably would have elbowed John, like, hey, write this down. And here's what he said. He said that you love one another. Now, again, when his guys would have said this, they were like, oh, man, like, or they would have heard this. They were like, oh, man, Jesus, you've already said this. You know, we grew up hearing that we need to love one another. But Jesus, he's dropping some new content. Again, he says this is a new commandment. And here's what he's kind of subliminally saying. Like, he's low-key looking at his guys and saying, hey, y'all don't know anything about one of the most important things in life, and that's love. And his guys were like, come on, Jesus, you know that we know about love. And he's like, no, there's something new. There's a new layer to love that I want you to understand. But maybe we don't have this recorded, but maybe Jesus would have said, because you have been pursuing love in a way that really isn't love at all. And point number one, if you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. What love is not. What love is not. See, Jesus, he's saying, hey, there's a new commandment. There's a new layer to this love. And what he's looking at his guys, he's saying, hey, there are some things that you don't understand about love. And sometimes the best way to understand what something is to first talk about what it isn't. And so let's just take a few minutes and talk about what love isn't in regards to some of the things that we've accused it to be in our culture. And so one of the things that we kind of said that love is, and we said love is a feeling, but let me just be blunt. Love is not a feeling. It is more than a feeling. And so when we think that love is a feeling, we think that, when I feel this way and it's overwhelming, like this has got to be it. Like I've got to go the distance in this relationship. And it makes sense in our minds. Like we all know that love is more than feelings, but some of you are watching this video right now and you are wrapped up in a relationship and there's really no substance to this relationship. You just know that it feels right. And there may even be some things that you're doing in the relationship that aren't right. And you know they're not right, but you're like, no, but it feels right. Like we just feel in love. And it makes sense that we would get this a little bit twisted, because even a neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio, he observed this in one of the studies he did, that 95% of our decisions are based on emotional influences. And so he's saying this simply, that we feel and then we act. And so I don't know if you've experienced this before. I'm sure you have, but you can get so intoxicated with love. Is that what you call it? You get so intoxicated with just a strong feeling and then you act upon it. And I don't want to minimize your feelings. But here's what I know to be true. That feelings are real, but they're not always reliable. Feelings are real, but they're not always reliable. And so someone can say that they love you all day and it can feel right, but just because it feels right doesn't mean that it's right. And so the Word of God, it's going to tell us what love truly is. One of the classic passages, this is read at a lot of weddings. You've probably heard this before, but it just gives some descriptions of what love is. And here's what it says in 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. It says, love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It is not puffed up. It does not behave rudely. It does not seek its own. It's not provoked. It thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Now I want you to make an observation with me. Notice that feelings didn't make the list. All right, so notice that it's not like you got to feel this way and then it's this ethereal thing. It's like, no, it's action point after action point after action point. And again, the irony of this passage is that we closely tie this passage to romantic love, but the person who wrote this, he's looking at a group of mixed company. He's looking at a group of married people and single people, of old people and of young people, of different socioeconomical statuses, and he's saying, listen, this is the type of love that should mark your life. It's more than a feeling. And this love is meant to be more than just a romantic love. It's meant to mark our lives in all relationships. Now, it's easy to kind of talk about how we are loving and that sort of thing. And even the book of wisdom, Proverbs, it says in Proverbs 26, it says, many a man proclaims his own steadfast love, but a faithful man who can find? And so like a lot of you ladies are listening to this right now, and maybe some guys as well, and you have really, you have dived deep into this ideology that I feel so strongly about this. And so you're in a relationship with a guy, or maybe you got some friends or whatever, and you just feel so strongly about this. But listen, he may say that he loves you, but don't look at his words, look at his walk. Don't look at all the aspirational things that he's saying, but look at the actions of his life. Some of you are like, but we just feel so in love, and like our song is Holy by Bieber, and so he's got to be good, right? And so just because he's listening to a song called Holy by Bieber doesn't mean that he's holy. Like, look at his life, look at his actions. Love is more than a feeling. But this is hard, right? Because some of you, like especially as you're looking at your life, and maybe you're nearing the end of your 20s, maybe you're in your 30s watching this, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, like I need to cuff with somebody. I need to get married. I need to progress in my relational life. And we'll kind of begin to think, I need to feel this love. And we'll look at our season of singleness, and we'll think that somehow singleness is like a sickness and marriage is the medicine. And so I've got to get married. And one person, when they were talking about their 20s and their decision to get married, they kind of referred to dating like this, and maybe this is relevant to you. They said that dating for me in my 20s was like musical chairs. Everybody was running around and having fun. And then I hit 30, and it was like the music stopped, and everyone started sitting down. You started getting all the wedding invitations. You're thinking, when's mine coming? When's mine coming? And here's what she said. I didn't want to be the only one left without a chair. That sometimes I think I married my husband just because he was the closest chair to me at 30. Sometimes I think I should have just waited for someone who might be a better partner, or maybe I should have, but that just seemed so risky at the time. And don't miss this. What I really wish I had done was thought more about marriage sooner, like when I was in my 20s. The second most important decision of your life is who you marry. And do not marry somebody based upon how they make you feel. Look at their life and see if they truly bear biblical love. Feelings are real, but they're not reliable. So that's what love is not. Another thing that love is not is love is not a fantasy. Oftentimes we think that love is a fantasy. And so, you'll talk to a couple, and guys, we're real bad about this, but you'll talk to them and be like, hey, man, how's it going in that relationship? And you're like, bro, I'm in love, man. Love's a fantasy. Like, I'm so in love. And I'm like, well, what do you love about that person? We got chemistry, bro. I mean, there's just something magical in our life. Like, and then I'll be like, maybe asking, well, tell me, what do you love about her? And you're like, well, man, look at her, man. She's bad, look at, and you're like, all right, you're telling me about all the exterior things. What do you love about her personality? And the guy would be like, well, but we're in love. They'll just keep going back to that, and they'll think, okay, I'm in love because of the way I feel when I'm with her, like I'm levitating. It's amazing, But is that love? I think we have this tendency to think love is fantasy because of the culture that we grew up in. Like the number 4 song right now in the top 10 songs is a song called 34 plus 35 by Ariana Grande. And it's all about sexual things. And so she's equating love with the way that I use my body, or the way that I do these things with these people. And this is such a common narrative in our culture. That's not like a one-off song. I mean, you can look at the top 10 songs and you'll see that narrative over and over and over. But then we look at God's word and we see things like this in Ephesians 5 where it says this, but among you there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality or of any kind of impurity or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of such things God's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore do not be partners with them. And so you may be saying, we're in love, but it's built on a broken foundation of physical attraction, and you're really not in love. You're just in lust. And this isn't true love. And you've made love something that it's really not. So ladies, let me just be honest with you real quick. Like if a guy is looking at you saying, I love you, and he uses his hand to reach for a part of your body and not an engagement ring box, don't trust him. Because he is proving to you that he has misunderstood love, and that the windshield of his life is iced over, and he's kind of barely looking through this dimly lit version of love, and it's not love. Or maybe we don't see love as feelings or love as fantasy, but I think for a lot of us, and really I think what Jesus is trying to undercut with this, guys, is this tendency to see love as self-fulfillment. And so we'll see love as self-fulfillment, and it's all about us reaching our self-satisfaction. And so you'll talk to a couple in a romantic relationship, or you just talk to a group of people that are just friends, and you're like, hey, why are you friends with that person? You're like, man, I just love that guy because of the way that I feel around him. I just love that lady because of the way I feel around her. Or romantically, you'll ask, what do you love about this guy that you're dating? Or what do you love about this girl? I'm like, man, I just love the way she makes me feel. And so what's funny is when you begin to kind of play out that, you're like, okay, so what you love about your friends, or what you love about your romantic, your significant other, is the way that they make you feel. So you've made your love relationship about you. Like, this is crazy. We all do this, but listen, that's not true love. Philippians 2:3 says this, to do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. So like these three, like love is feelings, love is fantasy, love is self-fulfillment, like I think that they've kind of created this cocktail in our society where if we're trying to navigate our life, again, if we're in this metaphorical car trying to get to this place, like the windshield has iced over, you know? And like maybe we're in this place where the windshield is iced over, and if you're from Kansas City, you're kind of low-key depressed because the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl, and you're thinking, well, what good is it, you know, and you're just kind of barely looking through this thing, and you're so confused, and inevitably what's happening is that you start slipping and sliding. And when I was driving on Sunday night, mourning the loss of our Chiefs in the Super Bowl, like I began to see cars, and like one car was stuck in a ditch. Now, I know that car did not start with that intention that night. You know, that car got on the road, and they were trying to do exactly what I was doing to go support our team in the game, and then they lost sight of where they were going, and then something happened, and they slipped, and then they slid, and they found themselves in this ditch. And a lot of you, that is a great picture of where you're at relationally tonight. Like it started out exciting, and then there was an unforeseen circumstance, and then you lost vision, and then you just kind of one decision after another, you slid off the road, so to speak. And so for some of us, the way this plays out in our society so often is that we just kind of slip into a relationship where people are living with one another. It's called cohabitation, or you know, you're like romantic roommates, if you will, whatever you want to call it. But there's an irony about cohabitation, and here's the irony: is that it seems like when you put it on paper, it seems like a great idea. Like, you know, you talk to people in their 20s, and one research said this, that 2/3 of people in their 20s, they believe that cohabitating is a good way to avoid divorce. And so, like, it's, you know, you got to try before you buy. You got to move in to see if you're relationally compatible. And like, it just, again, and by most rights, that seems right. But then you look at the research, and you find that couples that live together, research after research after research. I didn't pull some random stat. I mean, you can look this up for yourself, that research after research after research says that when you make the choice to live together before you're married, you will experience less marital satisfaction, and there are higher levels of divorce. And so it seems like when we read the Bible, it can be outdated, antiquated, and irrelevant to our modern day society. But then you look at the research, and you're like, well, maybe God knew what he was doing when he said, hey, you need to be in your own households, and then when you get married, you leave and cleave together, and you move in after you've made the commitment of marriage. Again, so many of you, you've just kind of slipped into this relationship that has led to one decision after another, and you just hopped in the relational car with someone, and you slid into this place, and now you feel stuck, and you're freezing from neglect in that relationship. And you need a new understanding of love. So what is love? If it's not feelings and fantasy and self-fulfillment, and when we pursue that type of love, it's kind of a foggy vision of what love is, and we can feel stuck because of that. What is love? Again, Jesus, he's telling his guys, I have a new commandment. You've misunderstood what love is. I've got a new layer of love, and he says this, that there's some things that you need to understand from me. And so he says, I've got this new commandment. You are to love one another. And then here's what Jesus does that is so brilliant. He adds a new layer, a new standard, if you will. And he says, this is the way you're to love one another. And this applies to your romantic relationships. This applies to who you'll spend Valentine's Day with. If you're going to spend Valentine's Day with somebody, this applies to your friendship relationships, to your boss relationships. This applies to all your relationships in your life. And here's what he said. He said, as I have loved you, that you also love one another. This is the standard. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. So how did Jesus love these guys? Like, I think sometimes we automatically just go, oh yeah, he laid down his life for those guys. And he eventually would, but when he says this, his guys, they don't really have the cross in view because it hadn't happened yet. And so you got to kind of play the reel back. And Jesus, no doubt, he would have looked at Matthew at this point and said, Matthew, you remember what you were doing when I met you? And Matthew, he was a tax collector. What that means is that he was robbing money from his own people to pay a Roman army that was oppressing his own people. He was hated by his own people. But Jesus, he comes to Matthew, and he's like, Matthew, remember what you were doing when I met you? And he's like, yeah, I was kind of like a pirate to my people, you know. And he's like, yeah, and you remember how I treated you, Matthew? And Matthew's like, yeah, man, we threw a party. And you believed in me when no one else believed in me. And now I'm here. He's like, yes, that's how I loved you. Then he looks at Nathanael. He's like, Nathanael, you remember what you said? If you don't know the disciples very much, Nathanael, when he heard that the Messiah had come, that Jesus was here, and when he heard he was from Nazareth, he started mocking Jesus' hometown. Like some of you, those fighting words. And Nathanael, he starts making fun of Jesus' hometown. And then Jesus kind of awkwardly was like, hey, you're talking about my hometown. And he's like, Nathanael, you remember how I treated you, even though you made fun of my hometown, all my people? And Nathanael's like, yeah, man, you loved me. You believed in me. And then, no doubt, Jesus would look at Peter and say, Peter, come on, bro. You remember some of the interactions that we've had, and how I believed in you at times. And Peter, you remember what you were doing when we first met? He's like, yeah, I was fishing. And remember I told you to cast the net on the other side of the boat? And you looked at me like, whoa, we've been out all night, And remember how I treated you, Peter. And one by one, he would have looked at his guys and said, remember how I loved you and believed in you and served you and sacrificed for you when no one else would have. He said, that's the type of love that you are to have for one another. He goes on in verse 35 and he says this. He says, by this, all will know that you are my disciples. Disciples means that they're his followers, like you're my people. He says, if you have love for one another. Jesus is saying this type of love, this believing, forgiving, giving a second chance, this long-suffering, this type of love is to mark your life. Here at Abundant Life, we have a vision statement, and what that means is that we want people to be able to see something in us and identify us as a church, not by the building we go to or by the brands that we wear or whatever, but they would see this, that they would see this love of God displayed on us. So we say it like this, that we want to be living proof of a loving God to a watching world. And so Jesus, he's got his guys together, and he's like, hey, there's a new commandment, a new way to love, and I want to teach you one of the key components that marks this type of love. And point number 2, if you're taking notes, you could write this down. What love is. What love is. And if you want to write down somewhere and make this really, really clear, love equals sacrifice. Love equals sacrifice. That Jesus is trying to help his guys get a picture of a new standard for love. And he's trying to even display this new standard for love. And so he gives them this command. And then the following day, they would watch Jesus literally sacrifice his life on the cross. And these words, no doubt, would have been ringing in their mind, that they would have seen this demonstration of love so clearly. Listen, if you want to love the way God made you to love, it's not about sacrificing animals to some altar. Like back in the day, that's how they thought that they pleased God, that they would take animals and they would go to like a special building and they would sacrifice these animals over to God. And what Jesus is saying, like if you want to please God, it's not about you sacrificing animals in some temple. It's not really even about you reading some holy book. It's not about you going to some amazing worship service per se. He says if you want to please God, then go love people sacrificially. That the world will know that you're my followers, Jesus said, if you love people the way that I love you. Love is sacrifice. See, the way people will know you know God is by the way you love them. I want you to think about your life real quick. So if we were to get like 5 words, all right, go to like your best friends, maybe you can text them this while you're watching this video and just say, hey, hot take, 5 words. How would you describe me? Just quick, just kind of blast them. Give me your hot take on me right now. 5 words to describe me, or maybe you ask some of your family, like, hey, 5 words. Do like a Wordle, I think it's called, whatever. 5 words to describe me, and I wonder if love would make the list. And if you're following Christ, and the people that know you best wouldn't use love as an adjective to describe your life, man, something needs to change. We are to be known by the way that we love. And Jesus, he's trying to give all of us right now a vision for what love is. And the standard for love is sacrifice. And so Jesus, he introduces this new, all-encompassing command that is far less complicated than the prevailing systems of do's and don'ts. Like he's not saying, hey, you got to do this, this, and this, and this. No. It's way less complicated than any religious construct that you could imagine. But listen, it's far more demanding. That if you want to love the way God calls you to love, you're going to sacrifice. There's no loopholes. There's no workarounds. And this new version of love, it's you laying down your life. And guys, if you could get this principle, like this is going to improve your decision-making ability in the way that you pursue romantic relationships, the way that you pursue work relationships, the way that you pursue friendship relationships. This is going to help you. So, are you a loving person? Are you a sacrificing person? If you're not a sacrificing person, listen, you're not a loving person. What is love? And I think sometimes right now, some of you are maybe right now just listening to this, and sometimes we'll begin to think, especially, I think this is prone for, women are prone to this. And so, like, ladies, let me just kind of speak to you. Like, I think sometimes you'll think, okay, I've got to sacrifice my holiness in order to be somebody that loves this guy, and so oftentimes you'll get into a relationship, and you'll see this a lot when people are in like an abusive relationship or a codependent relationship, and they think that they're being loving by rejecting what they know to do is right, and so they think that they're sacrificing in order to be loving to this person, but here's the problem with that is that you are sacrificing your relationship with God in order to settle in a sin relationship with some man. And so don't get this thing twisted. When we say that love is marked by sacrifice, it's ultimately a sacrifice to God. In any what you would call, quote unquote, loving relationship that would call you to sacrifice your relationship with God in order to be right, and that relationship is no relationship that you need to be a part of. And so don't settle for something that's not true to God's word. So you're in the decision decade. Again, you're making decisions day in and day out, and the decisions that you're making today are going to define the future that you experience tomorrow. And we say this all the time, that you're only becoming more of who you are today. And the greatest gift that you can give your relationships is a decision to die to yourself today. Let me say that again. The greatest gift that you can give your future relationships and your present relationships is to make the decision to die to yourself today. Can I just kind of share a word that really we all need to hear? And this is for me, this is for you, and let me just be really blunt. It's not about you, all right? And the more that you and I live where the world orbits around us, it's about us. Like, we've got to get over ourselves. And listen, again, I'm saying that to you, but I'm also saying that right to me. Like here's what I know to be true. Like, when I don't get my way, I get frustrated. When something inconveniences me, I get frustrated. Like, I don't like to sacrifice because I'm selfish. But I would say not even the majority, all the dysfunction that I experience in my relationships is because I am being selfish. And God is calling us to understand that love, it's not about us, and that nothing good will come in your life and in any relationship when you're living for yourself. James chapter 4, verse 1, it says this: what causes the quarrels and fights among you? I love this, that the Bible's like, hey, there's some issues. And where do you think those come from? Your ex, your dysfunctional friends? Where do you think the issues in your relationship problems stem from? So here's what it says. Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? And so what James is saying is like, hello, newsflash, the problem is you. Like the common denominator in all of your relational dysfunctions is because you were being selfish and you weren't loving. You thought love was a feeling, a fantasy, self-fulfillment. But love is sacrifice. In the 20th century, the Times, they sent out an inquiry to famous authors, and they asked the question, what's wrong with the world today? And this theologian named G.K. Chesterton, he wrote, Dear Sir, I am. Sincerely, G.K. Chesterton. And what Chesterton is saying, it wasn't this long, like, the problem with the world is the wars and all of this, no, he just said it's It's me. And that's the awareness that we need if we're truly going to love sacrificially. So maybe you're watching this tonight and you're thinking, okay, like, how do I kick sacrifice in gear? Like that seems like a difficult thing to do. And so let me just give you like 3 things that you can do to start learning how to sacrifice. The first one is this: you need to get a roommate. All right, and listen, a dog, a cat, or a succulent is not a roommate, all right? Like those things, they'll teach you responsibility, but ultimately they are not going to teach you sacrificial love to the degree that a roommate is going to. So if you're listening to this and you're living alone, like let's change that. Let's help you find a roommate, all right? And maybe even a dysfunctional roommate, all right? And so you'll begin to learn how to love sacrificially, how to manage conflict in this season, and that one decision could serve you greatly and set you up for marriage someday. The second thing that you could do to learn to love sacrificially is to serve in ministry. And what I mean by serve in ministry is that you would donate your time, donate your energy and your effort in a context that is going to improve someone else's life and really probably never thank you at all. And so let me just kind of give a disclaimer. I'm not trying to build this thing we call Paradigm, and so I'm not saying that you need to necessarily come serve with us. If you want to do that, great. But listen, I don't need you to serve in Paradigm. You need you to serve somewhere, all right? That there's something that God does inside of the heart of us all when we go and give our life away. That we need to serve, and we need to get in the trenches with people's life, and we need to learn how to love sacrificially. And sometimes it's thankless, and sometimes it's difficult, but God teaches you more about himself through serving in ministry than very few things. The third thing is that you could do this. You could just miss a meal 1 day a week for the next 6 weeks. The Bible calls it fasting, and what that means is you just avoid all meals that day once a week for the next 6 weeks, and just what you're doing is you're learning to tell your body no. Your stomach's like a spoiled child, and it doesn't need indulgence; it needs discipline, and you're learning how to sacrifice your wants and your needs, and you're learning how to be hangry but not like snap on somebody as well. And so this is a simple practice that will surface your inability to love sacrificially. And so you'll go to God and say, God, I need your help. Fill me. I need your help so that I can love the way you love. Get a roommate, serve in ministry, maybe fast once a week. What's love? Love is sacrifice. And Jesus is telling us that we're to love one another the way that he has loved us. There was this pastor in the 3rd century, and he was known really for 2 things. He had this like contagious joy, and so everyone that got around him, they're like, man, I really like that guy. And then he would consistently compel people to come to Christ. And so it was illegal for people to preach back in the day, but the people that were in authority, they just really liked the guy, so they let him preach. And then the emperor of that day, they were in this big war, and so he started drafting all these guys, and he made it illegal for the single men to get married. And then he made it illegal for the married men to be with their wives. And so this guy, his name's called Strongheart, is what his name means. And so he begins to officiate all these weddings, and he begins to connect all these people. And what he would do is that he would connect these people, he would marry them. Like he officiated like thousands of weddings illegally. They'd get married, and then he would also share Christ with them, and he would lead them to Christ. Well, eventually the news got out that he was doing this, and the emperor arrested him, and he comes before the emperor of Rome. And Strongheart is like he's got, again, this contagious joy, so much so that within just a few moments, like the emperor falls in love with the guy. He's like, man, I like this guy. I can't believe that he got arrested. But then, staying true to fashion, Strongheart, he begins to share Christ with the emperor. And he's like, tells the emperor, hey, you need to follow Jesus. The emperor didn't like that. And so he sentences Strongheart to be executed. While he's in jail, he stays true to his fashion, and he's just got this bubbly personality, and the jailer really kind of falls in love with the guy, and the jailer thinks, man, I've got this daughter that's really kind of down in life, and maybe I can bring her up here, and he could cheer her up, that sort of thing. Well, long story short, they start laughing with each other as they're visiting, and they fall in love in the short days that he's there and in prison, and then he pens one last love letter to his girlfriend, and then the following day, he goes to be executed. History tells us that he verbally forgives his executioners before they kill him. and he compels them to trust Christ. The executioners, they would have nothing of it, and they beat him mercilessly, so much so that his heart exploded. And he died on February the 14th. And Strongheart, his name in Latin is Valentine. And that letter that he wrote to his girlfriend on February the 13th is the way that a lot of us will sign a card this Sunday. Your Valentine. So as we go to the stores and we see all the chocolate and all the roses and all the balloons and all the romance and all the stuff that Valentine's Day has become, let us not miss the true meaning, the true heart behind the holiday. And it's that love is sacrifice. That you will never love the way Jesus called you to love if you're not sacrificing. And this guy, Valentine, he laid down his life and he sacrificed. Jesus said, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another." That ultimately the way that Jesus loved you was by laying down his life for you. That Jesus, he demonstrated his love by sacrificing his life for you. And here's what you need to know. You will never be able to love the way God made you to love somebody apart from understanding and receiving the love of God. Because you can't give what you ain't got. And if there's never been a time where you've said, "God, I need your love," then what do you have to offer this world in regards to love? You can't give what you don't got. And so God, he loved the world so much that he gave his only begotten Son, so that if you would believe in him, you wouldn't perish, but you could have everlasting life. That God gave you this special gift, and you must believe and receive in order to have everlasting life. And you can't give away the love that you were made to give away until you first received it from God. So, Paradigm, what is love? Let's pray. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for today. God, we thank you that even though it's icy outside and it's crazy, we're still able to communicate with one another through this platform. God, I pray for someone that's listening to this video that if they don't know you, that they would, in their room or wherever they're at, in front of their computer, their phone, that they would simply just say, "God, would you show me yourself? God, I want to receive your love. I believe that you died on the cross, that you rose from the grave. Would you fill me with your love today?" God, if somebody's listening to this and they've misunderstood what love is, God, I pray that you would help them to just to look to your word and begin to redefine what love truly is, and you would give them the ability to sacrifice the way that you have. God, I pray for all of us that we would make wise decisions in this season of our life so that we can live a life that brings you much glory. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.